Ich darf den nächsten Vortragenden vorstellen. Kjetil Thorsen mit dem Vortrag Wohin geht die Architektur? Snøhetta ist vielen ein Begriff und der Name ist auch im Laufe des Symposiums schon einige Male gefallen. Es ist ein riesiges Büro und es ist ein mittlerweile sehr großes Kollektiv mit Büroniederlassungen, mit Filialen oder Dependancen, wie auch immer man das nennen möchte, in Oslo, Innsbruck, Paris, New York, San Francisco, Hongkong, Shenzhen, Melbourne und Adelaide. Ich glaube, ich bin am neuesten Stand. Wenn ich irgendwas vergessen habe, wird Kjetil das korrigieren. Was ich so erstaunlich finde in diesem Büro, im Gegensatz zu vielen anderen Architekturbüros, die wirklich global umfassend tätig sind, dass Snøhetta keine Architekturfabrik geworden ist, sondern dass sich Snøhetta auch in der Struktur mit den Mitarbeiterinnen, Mitarbeitern, mit den Partnerinnen und Partnern diese Manufaktur und dieses am Menschen handeln und am Menschen arbeiten mit der Landschaft, mit den Ressourcen vor Ort in all diesem Wachstum erhalten konnte. Wohin die Reise geht, lieber Kjetil, oder wohin sie vielleicht gehen könnte, oder wohin es in deiner Meinung nach geht, werden wir jetzt erfahren. Bitte schön.
Diese Werkzeuge. Yasmeen, I will do the lecture in English. Thank you so much. It was wonderful to sit, and I'm looking forward to our conversation afterwards very much. Thank you so much. Pessimism is for lightweights. There is no straight white line. It's the bumps and the curves and the obstacles that make this road yours and mine. That's a quote from Selena Godman. She's an English writer, poet. And I think it describes some of the issues that I'm trying to pinpoint here today. It takes idealism to do architecture. It takes a life to build a sequence of understanding that it does matter. It's not something you believe at the very beginning of your professional career. However, at the very beginning of Snøhetta, Gro Harlem Brundtland, who was our first female prime minister, wrote a report to the UN called Our Common Future. It was the first time in a political document where social sustainability, environmental sustainability, and economic sustainability were starting to get defined. And we, as young as we were and as interested we were in this kind of document, we decided, is it possible to take this political document and turn it into design philosophies? Is it possible to take this document and turn it into something that can create new realities or new perceptions of possible architectures? So this little young bunch of people on the top of Snøhetta Mountain, for the first time, set out trying to combine landscape architecture and architecture as one. So they would encourage the clients, the possible clients out there, not to look at landscape architecture as something that, if there was any money left over, would come after the building was finished. So we set out in order to try, in this little office, as a collective, trying to promote ourselves in a way that would make meaning or give meaning to the content of our Common Future report. We were then, of course, extraordinarily lucky when we won the competition of the Alexandria Library in Egypt, a huge, big competition. But the most important was that since this was the first project, we had the possibility of testing out some of the theories coming out of our Common Future. One, the contracts with the clients, how to create the bids, how to provide for the workers on site, safety, security, water, how to combine local competence, local contractors with international knowledge and international contractors. Everything 50-50 for every subject in the building. how to train very young Egyptian stonemasons to deal with the surrounding carvings of the wall, where you have a stone industry that only knew how to cut 2-centimeter thick slabs, how to split the stone, how to hand carve it. We spent 2.5 years educating 25 young Egyptians, and they are still operating in this quarry that we had to reopen on the border of Sudan. Now, of course, we had also the pleasure of being able to design everything there, including chairs, lamps, tables, bookshelves, you name it, we designed it. But the thing was that the first series of products for these things were produced partially in Norway, partially in Europe. Then we took all the drawings and we handed over the copyright to the library itself. So now they're reproducing based on their own, they own the design and can do and change and develop this further. Now, we were back only last year for a 20-year celebration. It took us 12 years to finish this building, which is basically a short time, I would have to say. But for many architects today, it's a very long time. And, but, you know, there is no architecture without the user, without the groups that you actually created for. It's a beautiful platform. It can be beautiful. It can be a good platform. It can be a bad platform. But it, in the end,
and just basically having the library here, even with or without knowing about the background and everything, it's like a center where you can come to be and come to learn and come to mingle with a lot of people who have the same intellectual sort of thoughts in mind.
You know, it actually, as a platform, also activates to protection. And this is part of the 3 points I think I'm going to talk about. One is social sustainability, accessibility, primarily accessibility in our cities, and how you open up buildings to a larger public. Then, based on that, the public ownership that you can generate in relationship to these buildings. And then secondly, environmentally conscious buildings, and we'll have a look at that. But also, how do you actually create public ownership to a library, a big cultural institution, which brings us to the Arabic Spring Revolution, where it's then being protected by the inhabitants of the city, so it doesn't get ruined by hooliganism or any other way. And it was 1 out of 2 buildings in Egypt that were kept open during the revolutionary spring. This one and the museum, Egyptian Museum in Cairo. Now, I think jumping to the Opera House, which was, of course, another kind of programming issue that we had to bring forward. What is the Opera House about? It's about creating a new type of public access. It's about being able to walk on something you wouldn't normally be able to walk upon. And that brings us to the point where we have been discussing for the last 5 years the location of the body in relationship to architecture. Are you on, in front, behind, over? Where is your body located in relationship to your physical surroundings? So we've ended up saying that in the social accessibility realm that we're talking about, the spaces that we're talking about, architecture is the art of prepositions, which means the language has a certain meaning in direction of how you interact with your immediate surroundings once you are there, because your horizon is always where your eyes are. If you're 200 meters up, the horizon is with you. If you're below the horizon, underwater, the horizon is under the actual water horizon. All these things come together in a large kind of perception of programming and additional programming. Even in a rich country like Norway, you can make incentives in order for people to sensitize themselves, to discover things in themselves they've just had a kind of hunch that they had. But in the end, they discover themselves simply through reprogramming of public architectures. Now, this gives us the possibility, of course, to expand some of these big concerts that we've had on the roof. One of the biggest ones was Justin Bieber with 14-year-old girls tearing the fences down. You know, safety. What is safety? Safety is nothing. Safety means nothing. In nature, you have to take care. And that gives us, of course, again, the option of going back and relating to the things that we're dealing with on a normal basis. So how do you challenge your body? How do you challenge this? When I'm sitting on this chair right now, it belongs to me. It's my chair. When I move out, it goes back to the hotel. It's super interesting to understand that the closer you can get to your environment surrounding you, the more intimate you can get, the more you can own it for that period of time when you occupy it. Now, all these things, of course, are being dealt with, which we've heard, in our studios around the world. This, only a couple of weeks ago, we gathered about 250 people of Snøhetta from our different studios around the world to walk to the top of Snøhetta, which you see at the back. It's quite a hard trip, and I've just had my hip replaced, but I did manage to get up there, and I was the last one down. But these 250 people walk and talk. My grandfather told me, walking is looking down so you don't stumble, looking forward so you know where you're going, looking up sometimes to dream, and sometimes even looking back to see where you came from. And under this singular in the plural aspect, which is described by the philosopher Nancy, French, Jean-Claude Nancy, says the I and the we has no difference because it's all-inclusive. So we have to make sure that the singular and the plural is maintained, because that's how we can create collectives based on our own emotions. And one of the very first small projects that we did, which is part of a series we call keyless structures, meaning buildings without locks, without keys, available and accessible for people 24/7, is this little reindeer pavilion. Now, this is a pavilion where you basically stop the public from moving further into the landscape. This is the ending point of human being in this landscape. On the other side of this glass, there is basically only wild animals, and they come up and stare through the glass into the human zoo that we have on the inside of this building. Now, it's important when we talk about protection of landscapes, because this area used to be a testing field for the military. And this little cabin actually gave the possibility of cleaning up this whole nature area and removing undetonated bombs. And all of a sudden, we have an accessible and direct relationship between nature, the limits of human interaction with nature, but at the same time also an object that actually does attract enough people, concentrate them where we want them in nature, and stop every other movement in certain directions. So these keyless structures we kept developing in Norway. This is for the Tourist Association in Norway. It's also a keyless structure. You come in, you leave a note saying, I've been here. If you take anything, you can pay for it. You put it in a small box, and then you leave. So it's based on trust. And these keyless structures are based on trust. But what we find is that since they are keyless, they're being taken care of by the people using them. They're being protected by this group of people who continuously come to these places in order for them to stay overnight, bring their dogs into the dog house, and taking care of their beds, staying overnight, and the food, and of course the views. Now, these small interventions in nature have a certain capacity of attracting and sensitizing our experiences. We had that discussion yesterday. The contrasts that we sometimes want to bring into nature emphasize nature in a specific sense. One of them is this little walkway, which you see here, which actually is dealing with flut und ebbe, tide. And what happens is there is a transition between walking onto this little island, and then all of a sudden the steps are gone, and the biodiversity follows the flooding, and then all of a sudden it's full of snails, and then it removes itself back into 8 minutes only. Okay. Now, another one to show you these type of things is we had the university in Kristiansand, southern parts of Norway, said we need an observational platform for marine biological research. And then we had these two other brothers who said we want an underwater restaurant. Okay, so we combined the marine biological observation platform with an underwater restaurant. And all of a sudden, we saw this multi-aspect of architecture happening. So it became this artificial reef, underwater reef, where now we can see the growth is actually happening and the ecological aspects of it. And only by looking through this window from the marine biologists, we've discovered quite a few new species, which, of course, have to deal with the increased temperature in the water. And the biggest change in subsea environments are happening within 20 meters from the shore. And it's crazy how that actually happens. Now, the environmental aspects, these are powerhouses. They produce a lot more energy than they consume. And this is in Trondheim, fairly far north. I would like to say, if we can do it there, we can do it really everywhere. And since then, we've developed natural ventilation systems for another building in Oslo, 000. It was elected the second ugliest building in Norway last year, which I'm really proud of. But it's all based on natural ventilation system. 000 means no outside energy for heating, no for cooling, and only natural ventilation for housing, offices, and for shops and restaurants at street level. Now, right now, we're working on combining the energy production with the 000. And our next combination of these things is going to be quite revolutionary in the northern parts of the world, because we do believe quite strongly that every time we test something, there is a new experience happening. And all that we do, everything that we create, is just testing things. Like here, with this new Sami theater, combined with the school, coming from the horn of the reindeer, of course, and looking at the school, the slaughterhouse for reindeer, Sami theater, you know, the slaughterhouse is just 5 meters away from the stage. And these things happen when you're able to reprogram accessibility to buildings. And the Sami, of course, have one word, which is very important to me, called doji. It is creating and what you have created at the same time. This word doesn't exist in any other languages, I think, and it has this perception that doing and what you have done is described in one word. A local artist, we work with artists all the time. It's important to say that these things come together in a quite specific manner. The wood structures, the building, the cultural history, the colors, the clothing, all of these things make the building. The building, again, really is only the platform for how these things should happen. The interesting thing with the Sami costumes is that they allow you complete freedom in design. You can basically do whatever you want. There are no rules like with the dirndl, or I think, you know, you can explode with colors, you can do whatever you want. And I think this kind of notion of how things happen in First Nation situations in New Zealand, in Australia, in Norway, east-west cross, following the reindeer all the way to the end. But we have to create workspaces. This is a fish factory on the northern coast of Norway. And you know, these workspaces are actually a part of urban regeneration as well. We cannot go ahead and say, okay, we do not take care of the people living there by providing workspace. Or our investigations into a bank building, which is an everyday thing in Kitzbühel. What is the heaviness of Kitzbühel? How do you redefine the heaviness of Kitzbühel in a completely different architecture? And the spread, all of a sudden, also is an open, active kind of relationship. Or here, like another keyless structure in Alpbach, which is really, everyone says, why isn't there a bar in this building? Because it is open, free, you can bring your own food. And it's based on the Norwegian Tourist Association's thinking of not being a commercial space. I think all these things come together when we also talk about schools, education, like here in Gstaad for the Le Rosset, a wooden building that is now on its way, happening with these big communal spaces, looking at how you interact or even the school here in Klagenfurt, which is now soon starting, which is different typologies, production of energy, public spaces, covering and looking at them in different ways, bringing communities together. Or Lascaux, very important for me because the reindeer depicted here in the 30,000-year-old paintings are the same reindeer that you find by Snøhetta. DNA proves it is the same reindeer. And it's kind of crazy that 30,000 years of reindeer following the ice all the way up to where Snøhetta is important for recreating the historical caves of Lascaux and having people still visiting them without producing the CO2 that we have. You know, this is the opposite of Musk sending up the rockets, where 76,000 metric tons of CO2 is blown into the air every time you shoot a rocket going direction Mars. I mean, we cannot live from escapism. It's impossible. We have to solve the problems here. This is a surf school in New Zealand working with the First Nation there. You know, you have to breathe in people's mouths in order to be part of them, and every ceremony is about breathing in the mouth. Or here in Japan, a small cabin in Hokkaido for deep snow skiing and accessibility. But we do huge projects too. And the difficulty of transforming small projects into the experimentation of the big is really quite something else. But our responsibility is to provide accessibility to functions in cities where these functions have not yet been created for the public. One problem was with opera houses that since we created this typology, people are saying, when they create the program, yes, you have to have this and this and this, and then you have to be able to walk on the roof. That's not what we wanted to achieve. But now we're doing two, one in Busan in South Korea and this one in Shanghai. So you can see that the span of small and big scale relationships that we're dealing with for the moment is of a massive complexity. We have to embrace this complexity. We have to make sure that we don't misunderstand each other in the way we're dealing with these things. This library in Beijing just opened. We've put them in contact with the library in Alexandria. Now they have a poem relay happening between them. And all of a sudden, you create a series of platforms where these things can start looking differently. The last one, this is Roosevelt Library. But it's not about the library. It's about recreating in Dakota a biological sphere for the plants for this park. We created a seed bank from the original plants, and by that been trying to re-establish a nature that was gone at a certain time. But artificial landscape, but with nature at hand. So let me just, I had another quote, actually. I mean, this is important to me, because Jean-Luc Nancy, he said, you know, if being is singly and plurally thinking, then thinking is a matter of being with. And I love this quote. And it's going to be more and more difficult, because now the CSRD programs are coming to the EU. We will have to apply on everything. It's all about reliability, changing the regulations, do punk production, break the rules, and at some point, defining with instead of for. Thank you.
Kjetil, once again, many questions. I will shut up, but the one that will be asking questions to you is Hannes Meyer, and of course, all of you. May I ask you, and also Yasmeen, Lari, for the last time on the stage, we'll be preparing the chairs.
I think there's something about these chairs, and Kjetil mentioned it. It makes me feel of school. And I think that's quite fitting that when we speak about the future, that we're sort of back in school. That we're young again and that we have to speculate what we do in the future. So I think in school there are two models, basically, if we look at it a bit sort of polar. There are those in the first row and those in the last row. How about you? Were you in the first row? Were you in the last row?
I'm too old to be thinking of the future too much. Sorry, I'm too old to be thinking of the future too much. I only do my task. That's it, I'm afraid. You're the young people, you have to think about the future. Lots of young people here. So I think I'd remain at the back of the class. Oh,
Yasmeen, just wait a minute, I'll get your microphone.
sorry, what do I do with the mic?
No, you get a better
Okay.
one. You're getting a better one.
Maybe I don't have it switched on. Oh well, that's all right.
It's coming.
Let's carry on.
So I'm a bit younger.
Quite a bit younger.
Now you reset your life. You said you reset your life when you're about 59, I'd say.
No,
Is that
older,
correct?
I think.
Older? So you were older than that.
About
At what age?
yes,
When did
I-
you
yeah,
leave the
I
office?
think it's about that time. I agree. Yes, sorry,
Yeah.
I'd forgotten. Yes, yes. It's about
Yes. So let me pass on
Yeah.
a somewhat flattering question, but
No, it's
Kjetil,
okay. I
It's,
mean,
it's ahead of you. It's ahead of you. You haven't reset your practice, have you?
No.
Why not?
I mean, first of all, you know, when I mean, you asked another question first, now you jump to another question. I don't know which one to answer, but let's say, first row,
Yeah.
no other schools in Europe would let me in, so I had to go to Graz. This was, you know, open. All I had to do was to finish Matura, and they let me in, which was perfect for me, because, you know, my notes looked like shit, so there was nothing there. And basically, they allowed me to study for a very, very long time. And I think our self-consciousness in how we built the studio, to me, is a kind of way of creating a powerful environment. I think for me, I want to have independence from all the other buy-ups that we see big corporate companies are dealing with. And I want to have this independence long-term. I want to be a powerhouse with Snøhetta, influencing the right decisions at the right time, and that's why we are big. Because you fight bigness with bigness. Sorry, unfortunately. And it's one of the ways where I think we are trying then to promote, I would love to do the good thing, right?
The
To do
right
the right
thing.
thing. And it's hard, because you have, like even you just told me they wanted to almost to kill you there, you know, in downtown. So I don't know. I mean, it's a fight, no?
Yeah. Well, why should it not be?
No, it should be a fight.
I mean, there are so many injustices in the world, and as long as you don't see them, you don't really worry. But once you are aware, you can't let go, can you? I mean, you have to do the right thing. So it just happens that a point came in my life when I was finally able to see what the reality of my country was. And I felt that what I had been trained, as I had been trained, I was trained in the UK at what is now Oxford Brookes. I had to really unlearn many of the lessons because they did not relate to my reality anymore, or at least the reality that now understood to be. So I think many times, many people do feel that maybe they need to change track. And I think it's a very good thing. I think what I'm doing now is far more rewarding, so I'm happier. Yeah, I think it's a better life for me. And as I said, no money, so I don't have any worries.
Yeah. But I couldn't do what you're doing.
No, you're not in that context. I mean, why should you?
I'm born in one of the richest countries in the world,
know,
Norway,
I know.
pumping out oil every, excuse me, F day. You know, we are
Maybe
moving
they should
into...
stop. Maybe
Yeah,
they
it doesn't make sense. So I'd rather be supporting what you do instead of...
No, but I don't want charity. I don't want your support. What would I do with
yes,
it?
you do. Right now you do.
Why?
Yes. We're having this conversation.
Oh, well, that's... But
Now,
you're
how-
not supporting
You don't,
me.
no, it's not a support. I mean, okay. I would be in a situation, and that's why I'm saying I can't do
No,
what
but
you're
you'll be in
doing.
a position because you feel that you'll have the wealth. But if I don't care about wealth, then how can you help
absolutely.
me?
I agree.
No?
But what were the ideas, Kjetil, when you saw Yasmeen's presentation? Like, at the very end, you were leaning forward and you had such warm eyes. You were smiling. So, what were you thinking while you were looking at it?
I mean, that's why it's so hard to hold this short lecture after you, because you know you're doing absolutely good. And it's not up to me to judge, of course, but that's the feeling I'm sitting with.
Yeah, but you're doing good in your own way for your own context, and I think that's fine.
Yeah, we're fine.
Yeah.
No, I'm trying. Now,
you support me, that's fine.
Yeah, I support you because I think design is so important in our lives, and you are at the high end, but you are doing it very sensitively. You're not just pumping, sort of concepts and for making very glitzy work, which many architects do. You're not into iconic ways of doing, but yours is iconic work, but it's very low-key and it's very subtle. So I think you're doing a very good job for your own context.
Thank you.
Now, I'm feeling a bit bad for the next question. But then you actually showed it. I was so excited when I found out that actually you both worked for big oil.
Terrible. I want to disown it now. I'm atoning for it.
And you were very open and transparent about it. You showed the headquarters for the Pakistan State Oil, which was built while you were establishing the office. Now, it's fair to say that you had Saudi Aramco as the biggest oil,
God, you worked for Saudi.
as a client to build a building that is very shiny, at least on the images.
Yeah, not anymore.
But he didn't show
like
it.
twice as big as the Pakistan State Oil headquarters.
yes.
No, it's not to me to judge that, but I think it's interesting that you have that communality. You, I think, built it around 2018, completed in
Started.
So what does that give us to the discussion? You have basically the same experience. You moved on. You have this background of oil. Yes, we all have this background of oil. We have it everywhere, right? In some way. But building for Saudi Aramco is another dimension.
Well, what we try to do is to get them to spend as much money as possible on culture, right? So, yeah, and it is a pure cultural building. It has theater, concerts, libraries, museums, exhibitions.
But you didn't show it today.
No.
You're not proud of it.
I'm very proud of it.
Oh.
It has.
You want to back up with a critical question? You seem to.
No, but I'm just wondering, because I think what I know of the Middle East and all these kingdoms, they only want to show their wealth. They want it written on everything that they do, which I think is not a very tasteful way of dealing with things.
No.
So how were you able to avoid it? I mean, that's what I'd like to know.
But there is both. There is a young generation happening both in Saudi, in the Emirates for the moment, who are very, very conscious about how they move forward. So the shiny aspect of the building of Aramco are tubes, pipes that are bent as a fingerprint around the buildings in order to cool the building. So it's an environmental approach to how to deal with it, which is based on the capacity of bending pipes, which Saudi Aramco know how to do.
I open the door for you.
Yeah, it's fine.
You're now doing another building in Saudi Arabia, which is an opera house.
Correct.
That you're currently building. And I think here we see that we've shifted to natural materials. At least the project texts speak about mud bricks and other materials. How sincere is that? Now it's your chance to basically enter a new room.
No, it's super sincere. I mean, we're supporting an average aged population of about 25 years of age, developing extremely fast. We don't support the leadership. We don't support the politics, but we do support the people that we are meeting. And Saudi doesn't have an opera house. So why shouldn't they be able to educate? And we even have in Norway Saudi Arabian musicians that have been educated in the States. Why shouldn't they be able to perform in Saudi Arabia or in any other place which doesn't have it? When we built the library in Alexandria, the biggest arguments came especially out of Germany, saying, how can you spend this amount of money on the library in a city where half the population is illiterate? That's why. That's exactly the reason why.
No, but libraries are good.
Yes.
I mean, there's no
Yes.
doubt about that. But then the question is, would you like to explain what you're doing with this opera house that you're saying? Is it opera house? What kind of, did I hear mud brick? Did I hear?
It's mud and stone.
Mud and stone, okay.
Yes. And we worked with even the ITRA building for Saudi Aramco. Most of it is done on cladding surfaces that are not the pipes, is all rammed earth. We opened a huge production facility for rammed earth elements. We had Bangladeshi workers working on it. They went back to Bangladesh together with also Martin Rauch and established their own little production line of rammed earth elements. Now, I mean, you can excuse things. I'm trying not to excuse it. I'm trying to say what we did, and then it's for others to judge.
Well, what he's doing is better, because after Saudi have destroyed all their heritage, I mean, I don't know what they can retrieve, but it's a good thing for them to think about this.
You know, if you open up, let's say, the exhibition spaces at the Saudi Aramco building, which was the first museum showing pre-Islamic art. So all of a sudden, you're opening doors in direction of social awareness, but also in direction of cultural awareness, which is not anymore as tightly connected before. So culture is sort of the third leg in my mind, you know, as you move forward, because it's opening doors you didn't have before. We took Edvard Munch, a famous Norwegian painter, and exhibited paintings of individuals, people kissing each other in Saudi Arabia at that particular point in time when nobody else could do it. We had the same entrance for men and women. They were sitting together in the library. They were kissing behind the book stacks. They were sitting together in the same performance. It was the first public cinema in Saudi Arabia was in our building. So what I'm saying is, you can with architecture, if you push, if you are willing to fight, there are possibilities of changing certain aspects of society through the platform of architecture, is my opinion.
I think it's amazing to have your positions together on stage, because what we now see is what you said in the beginning. You believe in changing as working with the powerful because they have a lot of agency. You now say, or have been saying for a while, you work with the poorest to give them, to empower them, to give them agency. So in a way, we see two different strategies of how we can change the future of our societies or the trajectories of architecture. Would that accurately describe your strategies?
Yes. I think yes.
Our situations are different.
Yes, they're different.
So you're working in a different world, my world is something else. So yeah, I think that's good. I mean, this is what architects do. They relate to the context.
You don't seem to be overly satisfied.
Well, you see, my problem is I have reservations about working for the rich. I mean, but this is my own problem.
But you've done it in the past.
I did in the past, and that's why I'm atoning for it now. It's a long way to go still. Because it did damage irretrievably in many ways. I built the largest building at the time in Pakistan. 750,000 was nothing to you, but it meant a lot.
Yes, of course.
time.
I mean, something.
That was 1980s.
I think you should still discuss this question, not now, but in general.
No, but it's super
This
interesting.
question of you offered basically help and offered collaboration, when I understood correctly in the beginning, and you said like, I don't want it.
I don't want collaboration with the rich. I want it with the poor.
I don't know how rich Kjetil is, but maybe you're poor enough to.
No, I have for dinner. But architecture, our architecture practice has not been providing the owners with money, right? We have a salary, like everyone else employed in the company. The landscape architects make exactly the same as the interior architects, as the architects. We don't have a spread of different salaries. Of course, with responsibility there is a difference, but not necessarily. We have a flat structure. And this structure enhances and gives us the possibility to adapt into specific internal social systems providing people that are educated as architects, landscape architects, designers, providing them with jobs. They have families. They need jobs in the Western world. How can we not provide jobs for architects? In my opinion, we're educating far too few architects. Because, architects for parliament. I think we're losing a little bit out in our world if everything is about trying to be afraid of saying, you're an architect. Right now, it feels like I can get my head chopped off if I say I'm an architect, right? Because, everything we do is wrong in any case.
But you just described that basically what you also tried to do is to establish a company that has grown into a large entity, that you aim at equality in the company and fairness. And I think the responsibility within the own organization is also very important, right?
Yes.
Because this is something, like I remember when they did at the MoMA the Small Projects Big Change exhibition, that was, I think, a sort of an early moment of promoting small projects, like the one of the School of Anna Heringer that we saw. But actually, where was it printed? The catalog was printed in Hong Kong. It wasn't printed in Brooklyn or by a socially inclusive company in New York that would print. This would have been an action that they could have directly done, right? It's immediate responsibility we have in our actions. And I think what I read based on your practice is that you're well aware of that responsibility within your entity.
Yes, and we also love the making, right? I mean, we've established, for instance, now together with a group on the West Coast to bring back the carving of wood with the axe instead of cutting it with the saw. So we've done some few tests now to see how does that influence the long survival of the wood when you close the pores instead of cutting them open. And it's a huge difference. It's like maybe 100 years of difference simply by the way you treat and cut the wood. So you have less waste and you have a much tougher wooden building. And now there are young people coming who actually want to engage and learn how to deal with this. But it's not the only thing. I mean, there are so many things we can attach to that no one's doing also in the rich northern world. The Opera House for me in Oslo is an example. It was based on a Norwegian law, which is the right of roaming. So basically, by Norwegian law, you can go to the coastline anywhere. It's not allowed for private people to fence in the shoreline. You can go and swim, you can put your boat there, you can go on the outside and do fishing. So the building was intended to sort of make sure that this stays in the law. So the Opera House is a manifestation of a Norwegian law saying you have the right to roam.
Now, with this right to roam, which I think is wonderful because it brings us back to the sort of nomadic stage almost, and we know that Semper once described the sort of the initial stage one of herdsmen, and it would be a peaceful society where property is not disputed, and you would not need walls to protect, but it would only be the roof. So I think that this is a wonderful image. Sadly, we're now in a formal setup which feels a bit like classroom and opposition, right? We're sort of facing you as the audience. We are sort of put on a little podest, a bit like the animals on stage. But we want to hear your questions, and I'm sure, yes, I felt that. We have many questions. So the lady in the third row, please.
I have a question to Kjetil Thorsen. You showed us a range of beautiful constructions, huge constructions, and they were all new constructions. My question is, have you ever done a huge and beautiful renovation project? Have you ever been asked to do a beautiful renovation project? And have you ever had the possibility to propose the client to do a renovation project instead of asked for new construction?
Quite so few. Our first project after the library in Alexandria was the Lillehammer Art Museum for the Winter Olympics in '93, which was a reconstruction of an existing building by a Norwegian architect. So project number 2 was an addition and a reconstruction of an existing building. Since then, we've done the Musée de la Marine in Paris, at Trocadero. We've done Musée Carnavalet, interior further development of the architecture. Right now, we're reconstructing the Théâtre Amandière outside of Paris on the other side of the Grand Arch. We've done factory reconstructions. We've done, yes, we have our offices in a refurbished old warehouse.
But you did not show us.
No, because it was more about the Alpine. I was asked to look at landscapes in a different way. My problem is always when I come somewhere, what should I choose? I mean, we have, for the moment, maybe 300 projects on the table. And all of those are going in the same direction as I've been showing here. They're talking about landscapes, resurrection of situations, refurbishment of old buildings. But it's not the only solution. There are so many solutions to places who have and other places who have not. So Paris, for instance, it's really like in Rome, or, I mean, why would you build anything new? Even in Oslo, it's getting hard to build new. And you shouldn't, because there are a lot of empty spaces.
I will take this in my hands and literally ask for more questions. Konrad, Frei.
Hello, two worlds. We have been intensely. Hello?
This is on.
Passt. We have 2 days. We had 2 days of intensive proposals, thoughts, thinking, discussions about the problems of our near environment, which we are all familiar with, and we are talking about how people who have the money should build in this beautiful landscape. There were all aspects discussed about our own situation that is familiar to us. And here comes somebody in the last minute of our conference who opens our mind again, or lets us rethink what we have been invited to think so long. About 90% of mankind who live in an entirely different environment, which in the course of globalization, we should create a unification of mankind, which at the moment doesn't seem to go anywhere else but into economic developments and profits for the one side, at the top for the work and exploitation, more or less, of the 90% of the world. And it is just by the dynamics and the size of the problems, it seems to me that how we should develop our approaches, our theories, our ideologicals in terms of building, in view of billions of people who don't even have access to water. And that is your great input in me, that this possibly very much more urgent and for forming our future problems that we avoid to address. An idea could be to ask the organizers of the symposium to take up this other point of view of the world for the next meeting.
We are already thinking ahead. That would mean you're also warmly invited again, and of course, you as
That's
well.
what I was angling for. That's what I was angling
It's
for.
nice here, no? After all, we'd like to be here. And we haven't seen much of the town, so it was a busy program.
Thank you for that.
Gabu Heinde.
I think I want to thank Yasmeen for bringing up the notion of context. Okay, no, I'm sorry. Thank you, Yasmeen, for bringing up the notion of context. And by talking, I think you brought Nelson Mandela saying, it's not about charity, it's about justice, right? And I think, Kjetil, I think we need to talk about the context of a globally operating company with like 300 projects on the table. You're saying working for the rich, but we would also have to say maybe working exactly for a global, if I want to say it in a critical way, neo-colonial structure of kind of a northern rich, like a company based in a northern rich country, exporting, we could say it nicely, saying doing charity. I think that's exactly what was on the table, bringing charity, but certainly not bringing justice. So I think there's something about just facing it in a way that doesn't mean to stop it possibly, or it's everybody's decision. But I'm very grateful about Yasmeen being so clear about it's your context or it's my context, and I think there's something about how we should all think about in what context, in what larger context do we really want to operate as architects. Hopefully with most, again, beautiful, like with an aesthetic we create, but there is a need to really rethink this global economy as much as kind of a global operation of offices.
Yes, absolutely. Definitely. But maybe let me just say, maybe there's a misunderstanding. Our studios around the world is where we build, right? And they are autonomous. It's not like we are doing the designs in Oslo and sending them to Melbourne or to anywhere in the world where we're operating, not even to Innsbruck. These are autonomous studios with mainly locally employees. It's not like we have a top-down administration sitting somewhere telling people what to do in different places of the world. These are very autonomous. We've built them because we've had the possibility of doing things that we've been asked to do. And then we can guide through the studios that we have locally that operate autonomously in relationship to how we look at it, with the qualities and the core values that we're trying to promote. That's the only thing we assume that we are transferring. So context is, of course, at the heart of everything.
I think I was thinking of the context of the network of clients, right? I understand that.
We have all kinds of clients, but mainly we have public clients, for big cultural buildings. That's what we mainly do, but also smaller landscapes, redevelopments of certain parts. We don't have too many private clients, and we try to avoid that, actually. But one big problem I have, which we haven't done yet, is real housing in large scale, trying to look at how that could be implemented. We did invent a modular house many years ago. We were in production with it, but then it went broke. So we couldn't. But I'm trying to resurvive that. It's something about certain things of innovation that might now be better or easier to follow up. But no, it's not. The economic system is definitely not perfect. I mean, I would be the first one to agree, and the equity and distribution of money is definitely absolutely wrong. But you have to try to push as far as you can during your professional life with the means that you have at hand, and try to do your best. I'm not a lawyer, right? I'm an architect, and I try to use my profession in order to push these items forward. That's the best I can do.
Well, what I think what we have on the stage now is where we started, and it is, of course, highly ambivalent. And from what I hear here is that Kjetil, you mentioned that embrace complexity, which is certainly necessary. And Yasmeen, you said, let's break it down. Let's do one after the other. And if you talk about the client, it comes to my mind that it makes, of course, a great difference if you consider your client as the person. And you mentioned, Yasmeen, that is not a victim, but an agent in for his own benefit. And I think this is maybe the great difference that maybe to face the challenges of today, we need many agents, and maybe not the solution, but a path towards this lies in the education. Because as long as you consider your client as a consumer, which takes what you give to him, I think this is critical, and this is something which we can learn from your model a lot, I think. So, yeah, that's what I want to say.
If I may just talk here. Well, first of all, I think the question that Gabo has raised, I think everybody's got to do according to their context. So I think that's fine, whatever every architect does. The only thing I feel is that we need to really now think about lowering the carbon footprint. So whatever you do with iconic structures or whatever, as much as possible, we've got to now see how, we've used materials that will sequester carbon. We use materials that will lower that's why I'm against cement and steel, because they are very highly consumptive materials. So it's fine for architects to do architecture with a capital A, as I say. But at the same time, I think there's a whole number of other avenues that architects got to start taking. And for me, I'm not driven by any commissions, by any client, so to speak. My clients are the poor people who I know about, and I discuss with them, and I deliver what they need, but I'm not driven by a client who tells me what to do. And that's the freedom that I have, and that's the freedom that even in the streets of Karachi, people are my clients, I treat them as clients, but they're the ones that I know what their needs are. So I think now the time has come for us. There are many architects, many young architects I know who want to now tread a divergent path. And what I would like really, and we were discussing a little bit earlier, how do we make that possible? Because there are many, of course, flourishing architect practices, and they must continue, but there's got to be other ways as well.
Yeah, I would agree completely. And to some extent, this is, again, embracing complexity is complex in itself, because you're continuously being put between a hard place and a stone. You have to make choices and priorities in the way you're dealing with things, trying to do the best. So, for instance, the educational system that we're sitting with today, in most of the schools in the northern parts of the world, are driven towards individualizing architecture at a certain level where you're expected to become a star. It's hugely difficult. So how do you build or reconnect a more collective understanding of how architecture in its total complexity can actually move forward? So it's also our responsibility. Yes. So when we work on research on concrete to lower the carbon footprint, or we sit at the Obel Award and try to hand out prizes that are dealing exactly with these things, lime is one of them. You can actually take the CO2 out of the cement production with lime, and then you have this fantastic little powder, white powder, which you remix back into the cement, and all of a sudden you have a CO2 neutral cement. The concrete is not yet CO2 neutral because you have the steel and so forth, but yes. And we know there are solutions, and we keep researching them. And this powerhouse that we have right now also has a bit of money to do research, right? So we can research this. We do, of course.
Yeah, sorry, because I think that's very important. There's a lot of research going on in many universities. We've got to help them to bring it to the table now for general professionals to be able to use it.
Yes.
That's not happening. So maybe practices like yours can actually push for that.
Absolutely.
And say, what are the materials that now should use? So continue with your projects. I have no problem as long as you do the right thing in that way. Because finally, it's how much you extract from the planet. And if you're helping there, then you can work with Aramco, whatever the name of these companies, you know.
I mean, yesterday we heard about kelp. Okay, kelp is one of the
kelp is
fastest
yeah.
recovery. It's even faster than bamboo, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So
yes.
what's happening for the moment is underwater understanding of environments and biotopes that are being developed. Now, the harvesting of kelp is one of the biggest, and we've tested out small kelp bricks.
Yes.
They can actually be produced on a totally different scale
Yeah.
than what we're seeing today. But the kelp can also be used for medicine, for food, for a lot of other things, and we see the content of a lot of natural materials. We've talked about mycelium. We've made thousands of square meters with self-grown mycelium acoustic panels, okay? But nobody wants to upscale. So
why can't be upscale? Because there's so much of it. But anyhow, that's
I think this is really one of the big questions. How do you scale up all the knowledge, all the research? We're creating so much knowledge, new knowledge from the past, but also in the present. How do you scale that up? You're presenting different strategies of how you do that, from the bottom up or with the powerful. I think, Kjetil, you said at one point during the symposium, if you settle too early on a solution, you miss out on the possible other solutions.
Yes.
And I think this openness is something we should really cultivate. And we got presented many strategies, many ideas, many fantastic examples, and whole lives dedicated to that quest. And I think this is something we can take with us and develop further. Now, Konrad Frey, you had one tiny short question. Now you promise it's a short question. It's not a long statement, it's a short question. Can you do that? Then you get a microphone.
Yeah, it works. In my opinion, your approach, probably than the other, but the two of you couldn't be further apart in any level of consideration. Yasmeen's work and ideas and message are full of questions. You are at the beginning of a movement which we are interested in because, on the other hand, Kjetil is an architect. You have made some very fine buildings, which you have shown to us. Very intelligent and interesting ideas incorporated, but it's all, in my view, in the mainstream of our world architecture, and I cannot see any indication of your answering the question, which is noted in the program, wohin geht die Architektur. I cannot see any indication that your architecture is not only yours, but many of your colleagues of doing fine architecture in present day views could take us to the future. There is no answer to me.
Okay, well, I happen to disagree with all respect, but it depends on. But it depends on how you see the development of future architectures, right? So it happens on many levels, in my opinion. It doesn't only happen inside your own practice. So, but you're right in one particular thing. You know, I don't regret the things we have done. The only thing I would possibly regret is the things we haven't done. And to some extent, you're right. But at the same time, I think we're pushing the limits with our clients in direction of a lot of new different typologies that are also based on how we have an input on the program. To me, for instance, walking on an opera house is an invention. It hadn't happened before. So to me, that is opening up a public space in a different way. So if you look at accessibility as a notion for certain types of cities, densities, maybe it's one solution. We don't have the answers to all the problems of this world, and I'm not claiming that we would have. But there is an element of renewal and change, in my opinion, in a lot of the things that we do, and at least we try to push the borders.
Yasmeen, we all know about the power of images. You also have them. You have the people that work with you on these projects. Now, if you want to plant one image into our heads that we carry on into the future. We're still young. We want to have that image from you. What would you tell us? What would you describe as an image?
It's very difficult to say what is that one image, because I'm driven by images of just disparities, and I need to just keep on working out how do I get to them, that they are no longer poor. So my images will be very different from what you might be. But to say that there are principles that can be carried through, and I said decarbonize. That is what is needed by all of us. So all of us architects carry a huge responsibility. And I think there are young architects who are very keen to do that kind of work. But we've been discussing among ourselves and so many others, how do we change the definition of architect? And that must be done. Otherwise, my own view is that maybe in a couple of decades, the way architecture is interpreted, or architects are, we might become redundant.
You said you're an architect, you don't want to become redundant, you're working towards the relevance, or you're working on the relevance. You both do. It's fantastic examples of what we can do in our profession, whether we call us artists or curators or architects, or just human people, inhabitants of Hallstatt and the Salzkammergut. I think we can all work on that, and we all can work on decarbonization. Thank you very much. Thank you, Yasmeen, Lari, for your thoughts. I think it's so